Hello. Today I'll be talking about Eminent Domain. This came out 2011, so quite a while ago. Um, I believe that's when I acquired it when it came out. I don't remember if it was a Kickstarter or if I just bought it, but anyway, it had been a while since I'd played this one, so I decided to get it out, play it solo. I have played it with other people, but played it solo yesterday, and now I'm going to do a setup and how to play. So let's get started. First thing you do is put the central display in the middle of the play area. Next, you'll deal each player one politics card. I'm doing a 3-player game, so I'll be dealing out 3. Any unused politics cards will just be removed from the game. Separate the other role cards by type and place them on their indicated spaces on the central display. These don't need to be shuffled because they're all the same. There we go. In addition to their politics card, each player will take 1 warfare card, 2 colonize cards, 2 research cards, 2 survey cards, and 2 produce trade cards. They'll then shuffle that deck up and then turn it face down, and that will be their starting deck. Let me get that done for the other 2 players. You take these starting planet tiles, shuffle them up, and randomly deal 1 to each player. Face down. Any remaining starting tiles will just go out of the game. You then shuffle your planet cards and place them in a face down stack somewhere near the central display. You then take a number of player aid tiles. Depending on the number of players, make sure one of them is the start player tile. Shuffle those up and deal them to each player. Then everybody can look at the back, and whoever got the start player aid tile will be the start player. So my starting player will be this player. Players would keep these player aids. I'm just going to go ahead and move them out of the way as I only need 1 since I'm playing solo. You then take your influence tokens, separate out the ones with the blue borders. In the manual it shows to put the influence tokens with the black borders here on the central display. I'm going to just keep them in this little token holder, and you just keep these off to the side in case you need them later near the end of the game, and I'll explain that when we get there, but I'm just going to put these off to the side. You then separate the technology cards by type: fertile planets, advanced planets, and metallic planets, and put them face up near the board. And these decks are available for all players to look at any time during the game. Finally, each player will draw 5 cards into their hand, and that will be their starting hand, and then we're ready to start the game. Also, you have these ships that you need to put somewhere near the play area, and you have these resource tokens that you need to put somewhere near the play area. I don't think that was mentioned in the rule book, but they're there, and you need to separate them and put them somewhere near the play area. So I just have mine in these little token holders. Alright, so how do we play? What can you do on your turn? Well, we can look at this player aid. First thing you can do, which is optional, is play a card from your hand for its action. So you can see, like, the colonize card has an action of settle 1 planet or add a colony, which we'll talk about all that shortly. The research card has an action of remove up to 2 cards of your hand from the game. So each card has a certain action. So on your turn you can play 1 card as an action. For instance, the survey card lets you draw 2 cards from your deck. So you could play that. That goes into your discard pile if you play it as an action. Now again, you don't have to play a card as an action. That's optional. But if you played that one, then you could draw 2 cards into your hand from your discard pile. Then the next thing that is mandatory is the roll. So you choose 1 card from the board, and you have to do whichever one you choose. You have to do the roll listed on it, and if it's your turn and you're the one doing the roll, you have the option to do what it says under leader. So for instance, if this player wanted to do the roll of survey, he gets to look at a number of survey symbols -1. So let's say he takes this card as his roll. Then you can, whenever you're doing a roll, you can boost that roll from cards from your hand. So maybe he wants to boost it with this one. So now he has 2 survey symbols. So he can look at a number of survey symbols -1, planet cards. So 2 -1 is 1 planet card and keep 1. So he could take the top planet card and keep 1. But since he's the one doing the roll, he can do the leader action and look at 1 additional card. So he would actually get to take 2 cards, 2 planet cards, look at them, decide, look at the front and back of them, decide if he wants to keep 1, if so, or he keeps that one. Whichever one you don't keep, you discard face up next to the planet pile. Then these cards you used for your roll go into your discard pile. So every turn, since you're taking a card for a roll, you're adding 1 card into your discard pile, so you're growing your deck of cards. Now, after you've chosen a roll and done it, for instance, he did the survey, each other player has the option to either dissent, which means not follow, in which case they can draw a card from their deck into their hand, or they can follow, which allows them to do the same roll, but they don't get to take a card, and they don't get the leader bonus. So for instance, he did the survey roll. So this player, he could, if he wanted to, he could say, okay, I'm going to survey also, but he only has 1 survey card in his hand, and since he doesn't get to look at 1 additional card, he only has 1 symbol -1, so he wouldn't even have enough to draw a planet card. You'd have to have at least 2 survey cards in your hand in order to take the top planet card. Since he's only got 1, he would probably dissent, and then he would get to draw a card into his hand. And the next player, the same. He's only got 1 survey card. So since it's look at the number of survey symbols -1, he would have 0, so he wouldn't even get to take 1 card from there. So he would probably dissent also. But later in the game, you may have 2 or 3 survey cards in your hand, and then you may want to follow in order to get some more planets available to you. So you come to the cleanup phase. So any players that played cards for that roll, so the person that played, whose turn it was and chose a roll, any cards they played would go into their discard pile unless they tucked those under planets as colonized, which we'll talk about that here in a little bit. And any cards that the other players, if they followed the roll instead of dissenting, then they would discard cards that they played into their discard pile. Then finally, only the player whose turn it is can discard any additional cards they want to from their hand, and then draw back up to their hand size of 5. Now your hand size may increase later in the game as you get planets added into your empire, they'll have a symbol that shows, cards +1, and that will increase your hand size. But the starting hand size and standard hand size is 5. So again, if you finish the cleanup phase by only the player whose turn it is can discard any additional cards they want to from their hand and then draw back up to their hand size. And again, the starting hand size is 5. So let's look at these planets, starting planet or another planet you may get from survey. They have these icons on them. First, this tells what kind of planet it is, fertile or advanced, or there's also metallic. But this shows how you can acquire this planet. You can acquire it by attacking it with 2 fighters. And the fighter type, there's different sizes of fighters in here, but that doesn't matter. They all equal 1 fighter. In a expansion, then the size of the fighter does make a difference, but in the base game it doesn't. So anyway, you can acquire by attacking the planet with 2 fighters, and if you do that, then you can flip the planet over, and then that is your planet, and it will be worth that many victory points at the end of the game. And you can also produce resources on this one. Some other ones will have different symbols. The other icon is colonize, which is the other way to acquire the planet, by putting colonize cards in there or underneath it. Once you have at least 2 colonized cards underneath it, you can then settle the planet. And we'll talk about, when we go over all the different roles and actions, we'll talk about how that's done. But if you settle the planet, then you can flip it over just the same as if you attacked it with fighters. And as you can see, this one takes 4 fighters if you attack the planet to acquire it, or 5 colonies on it, colonized cards on it, and then you can settle it and flip it over. So let's go over each of the cards. We've gone over survey. Again, the action on survey is draw 2 cards, and we've gone over what the role is. It lets you look at planet cards depending on how many survey cards or icons you have, and then put one into your play area that you can then try to later attack or colonize to make it an active planet in your empire. All right, let's look at the warfare card. For an action, you can attack 1 planet. Remember, I said if you have a number of fighters equal to what's displayed on the back of that planet, you can attack it. So the way you would do that is use a warfare action card. You can attack it if you have that number of ships, and you would discard those ships and then flip it over. So again, if you've acquired ships and you wanted to play a warfare card to attack this planet, you would discard 2 ships, and then you could flip it over, and then it's an active planet in your empire. So for an action with the warfare card, you can attack 1 planet or just collect 1 fighter. So that's how you get fighters. You could just play a warfare card to collect a fighter and put it into your play area that you can later use to attack a planet. If you're doing your roll with the with a warfare card, so for the roll you would take a warfare card into your play area, and you could collect 1 fighter, or if you're the leader, the actual person whose turn it is, you can attack 1 planet instead. And when you're doing a roll, you can boost that roll. So if you have, for instance, if for your roll you decided to take this warfare card to collect 1 fighter, you can also boost that roll with any number of cards in your hand or planets you have that also had that symbol. So if for his roll this player took this warfare card and this was his hand, he could boost it with this card, and then he has 2 symbols, so he would get to collect 1 fighter per symbol, so he would get to collect 2 fighters. Then the other players who, if they decide to follow, they can do the same. If they have 2 or 3 warfare cards in their hand, they could play those and collect 2 or 3 fighters, you know, depending, or just one. Even if they just have one warfare cards in their hand, they could follow and collect one fighter. So when you're doing the roll, you can, if you're the person whose turn it is, you take one card and you can use that card's symbol, plus you can boost it with any card you have from your hand, or some planets may also have that symbol, and you can add those to boost the roll. And then those that are following, if they decide to follow instead of descent, they can do the same. The only difference is they don't get the leader to do what the leader bonus is, and they don't get to actually take a card. Only the person whose turn it is takes one. As I'm explaining this, it all seems kind of confusing, but when we get to the example turns, you'll see it's actually pretty easy. All right, let's look at a colonize card. For if you have that in your hand and you play it for an action, you can settle a planet. You can settle a planet if it already has a number of colony or colonize cards tucked under it equal to the colonize or settling value there. In this case, 2. So you could settle a planet if it already had a colonized card under it, or you can add one colonized card to it. So you could tuck for your action, you know, if he played this card for his action, add a colony, he could tuck that under there, and then it's got one under it. So if he did that for his action, and then next for his roll, he may want to take a colonized card, and you can see for the roll for a colonized card you can add +1 colony. So he could add this one if he had any additional colonized cards or colony cards in his hand. He could also add those, you know, because some later, like this one, takes 5 colony cards under it before you can settle it. So if he did that for his roll, where he added this colony or colonized card to the planet, even though now it equals the number of, he's got a number of colonized symbols equal to the value needed to flip it, because he didn't do the settle roll, he can't flip it at this time. Now later, he can, on a future turn, he could play a colonized card to settle it, or on a future turn he could take the roll card, and since if it's your turn and you're the leader, you may settle one planet instead. So he could take the card, just put the colonized card in his discard pile, and then settle the planet by flipping it. And when you flip it, you take any colony cards under that and put them into your discard pile, and then that planet is available and active for you. And of course, after you've done your roll, and other players can do the same. So if they have colony or colonized cards in their hand, they could put any number of those, tuck those under any number of planets that they have if they want to. Or again, you can always dissent and not follow and just draw a card into your hand. Your hand limit is only checked during your cleanup phase, so you can always draw more cards into your hand when you're dissenting and have more cards than your hand limit. The only time you have to get down to your hand limit again is in your cleanup phase on your turn. Alright, let's look at the produce trade card. You can either use it as an action to produce one resource. If you have a planet already in your empire like this one, if you played a produce trade card for an action of produce, you could take a resource of the matching color there and put it on that planet, and now it has a resource on it. If you already had a planet with a resource on it, you could play a produce trade card for the action of trade, and you then get to trade that resource by removing it and taking one influence and adding it into your play area. And similarly, when you're doing your roll, you take a produce trade card, then you can produce one resource per produce symbol, so you'd get to produce one. If you had any other produce trade cards in your hand or symbols on planets you've already flipped over, you could produce additional resources if you have the planets that can hold them. Each one can only hold one. Or you can take the roll as a trade, and similarly you can trade any resources depending on the number of trade symbols and get influence points for those. And again, once you've used it in your cleanup phase, that card that you took for the roll and any additional cards you played from your hand would go into your discard pile. And again, any other players, they could follow by doing the same. If you did produce roll, then they have to use the produce. They can't do the trade. If you did produce, then this player couldn't follow and do a trade. They have to follow doing the same roll that you did. But if you did the trade roll, then they could follow with any number of trade cards or symbols they have on planets in their area to do the same. Or they can descent and draw a card. And finally, the research card. You can, for an action, you can remove up to 2 cards in your hand from the game. So normally when you're using cards, after you've used them, they go into your discard pile. But after a while, you may end up getting a lot of survey cards or colonized cards that are kind of clogging up your deck that you may not want anymore. So you can play a research action card to discard 2 of those cards just out of the game. They won't go back into your discard pile and then won't be clogging up your hand as much. But the more important piece, I think, of the research card, if you take that for its roll, is it allows you to acquire a technology card after satisfying its research symbol requirements and planet requirements. So that allows you to get these technology cards. So for instance, if this player took this for his roll and he boosted it with these other 2 research cards that are in his hand, he then has 3 research symbols. So because he has 1 fertile planet, he could look at these research cards. This is the requirement here. You'd have to have at least 1 fertile planet and then 3 research symbols, which is what he's able to play. So he could acquire this card and immediately put it in his hand. And it has an action that he can use to collect 2 fighters or attack 1 planet. Or it's also got a colonize or a warfare symbol, so you could use that to boost a colonize or warfare roll in the future if you wanted to. There's different technologies. There's some that end up costing more. Like this one, you have to have at least 2 fertile planets in your empire, and you have to play 5 research symbols to acquire it. But it's besides whatever action it has. Like this one, you put it into your play area, not into your deck. So there's another one that requires you to have 3 fertile planets in your empire before you can get it, and it costs 7 research symbols to acquire it. And there's different technologies for the different planet types. Again, fertile, advanced, or metallic. So that's what the research roll allows you to acquire more research cards, which hopefully you can get into your hand and acquire technology cards that will help you in the future. One thing, you can take a research card for a roll, even if you don't have enough cards to acquire a technology. You can still just take the research card for the roll, so it'll end up going into your deck, and then you just won't be able to acquire the technology. And then, of course, the next player, if he has research cards in his hand, he can follow and also try to acquire a technology, or he can descent and draw a card and so forth. So once a player has done his action, if he's going to do an action, done his roll, which he must do, done his cleanup phase, then it goes to the next player, where they will do the same. And you'll just keep playing around like that until either one or of two things happens. If the influence tokens run out, then that will trigger the game end. So you'll finish. You'll just finish out the round. So if the last token was taken by the first player, the other two players would still get to take their turns. And if they would acquire influence tokens on their turn, then that's what they would grab, these blue ones. They still are just worth one influence, but they're just used because the regular influence pile has run out, which is a game end condition. The other game end condition is when a number of stacks of cards on the central display are depleted. And that depends on the number of players. In a two-player game, in a two or three-player game, as soon as one stack is depleted and empty, then that will trigger the game end. So you'll just finish out the round, and then that will end the game. Or if you're playing three players but you want to play the extended three-player game, which is exactly the same except for the game ends after two stacks are depleted, and then for a four-player game, the game also ends when when two stacks are depleted. And when the game ends, you determine the winner by adding up influence points from the tokens you have, from planets you've flipped over into your empire, and as I showed, some technology cards are worth influence points, and whoever has the most influence points wins the game. If there's a tie for influence points, then it's the player who has the most resource tokens and fighter tokens. Then that player will win the game, and if there's still a tie after that, then the rules say play another game to determine the victor. So that's it. It probably was a little confusing. It's a little confusing, I think, at least me explaining it. But when you actually see me play it here with some example turns, it's actually playing the game is pretty simple, but their strategies maybe not so much. All right, so I think I've got everybody back to how they are that's after setup. So we'll just start. This guy's the start player. And we'll just kind of do what we showed in my example for his action. He's going to play this card into his discard and draw two cards. And then for his roll, he will take we'll say he's going to take a colonize, and he will put that under here, and he'll boost it with this colony card. So now he's got the required number. So even though he's got another colony card, he doesn't need to boost with that because he's got the required number. So that's all he's going to do. Now the other players have a chance to follow. So if he had a colony card or a colonized card, he could place it at colonies if he wants to, but he doesn't have one. So he'll descent and just draw a card into his hand. This guy, we'll say he is going to follow, and he's got two colonized cards, and so he's going to follow, and he can boost with as many cards as he wants, so he's going to place both of his under there as well. So he didn't descent, so he doesn't get to draw a card. Alright, now this guy has to discard and draw back down to his hand limit, but he is at his hand limit of 5. Now he could discard some of these if he wanted to, and in fact I think he is going to discard these 2 research, because 2 research cards isn't really going to do him any good at this point. So now he'll draw back up to his hand limit of 5, and his turn is over. Alright, so now we come to this player. We'll say he's going to play for an action, and again, action is optional, but he is going to play for an action. He's going to play this card, so this will go into his discard pile, and he's going to collect 1 fighter. So he can just take any of these, it doesn't matter which one he takes, so he'll just put that in his play area. Alright, now he's got to do a roll. For his roll, he's going to do the warfare. Oops. and he's going to collect one fighter per symbol. He doesn't have any he can boost it with, so he's only going to get to collect one fighter, but we'll just say he's going to take this one, and that's all he's going to do. So now the other players, they can follow if they want to. This guy doesn't have any warfare cards, so he's going to dissent, so he draws a card into his hand. This guy, he does have a warfare card, so he's going to follow, and he's going to also collect a fighter. So he's going to put that in his play area. Alright, now everybody that followed or did the roll has to discard any cards they played. So this guy has to discard this card, and now he can discard and draw back up to his hand limit, which he's at 5 right now. So he's going to discard his research, and he'll draw 1 to put him at 5. Alright, now it's the next player's turn. Alright, he's going to do an action of a survey and draw 2 cards. Alright, now he's going to do his roll. Alright, so for his roll, since he's got the required amount of colonies already under this card for his roll, he's going to take the colonize. Now because he's the leader, he can settle a planet. So he's going to take that. He doesn't need to tuck it under because he's not going to add a colony. He's going to do settle the planet instead. So he actually gets to flip this over, remove these colony cards. They go into his discard pile. And now any other player can follow that roll. They can't settle a planet, but they can add colonies if they want to. This player doesn't want to because even though he has a colonized card, his colony is at the limit. Now he can't settle because he's not the leader of the roll, so he'll dissent and just draw a card into his hand. This player does have a colonized card he could add if he wanted to, but he's going to attack it, so he doesn't want to, so he's going to dissent and draw a card into his hand. So this guy now, he's got to discard the card that he played, or that he drew for the roll, and now he can discard down to 5 cards, and so he's going to discard this one and draw back up to 5. And now we'll be back to the start player. I'll do one more round and then we'll wrap it up. So we're back to the start player. He's going to play this card for its action, and he's going to settle 1 planet. So that goes into his discard pile. He can settle this one because he's already got 2 colonies, which it requires. Those go into his discard pile, and now he's settled that planet. Now for his roll, we'll say he wants to survey, so he'll take that card. Now remember, because he's the leader, he gets to look at 1 additional card, which basically negates the -1. So he's going to play 2 because he's going to boost with that one. So he gets to draw 2 planet cards and keep 1. So he'll draw these 2, and you can look at the front to see what it's going to take to conquer them, and you can look at the back to see if they have what victory points they're worth. That one's going to be, or influence point, it's going to be worth 5, but you can see it, well, it's actually only takes 3 to settle, so not too bad. Now see, this one has a warfare symbol on it, so when you're following a warfare roll, you can count that as one of your warfare symbols. But he thinks he's going to add this one, so he adds it face down. The other one just gets discarded face up. So now the other players have the chance where they could follow. So this guy, he's going to follow as well. He's got 3 survey cards. Now, because he's not the leader, he's got... No, that's not a survey card. He's... I don't know what I was thinking. He's got 2 survey cards. Since he's not the leader, he gets a -1, so he can only look at 1 and keep 1. So basically, he's just going to take the top one off of the deck and put that in his play area. And this guy could follow as well, but he's not going to because he's only got 1 survey card, so he wouldn't even get to look at anything. So he'll just dissent and draw a card into his hand. Alright, so now any cards that were used in the roll are discarded, and now he has to discard and draw back up to his hand limit. Now his deck is empty, so now he has to shuffle all his discards. Anytime you have to draw and your deck is empty, you got to shuffle your discard pile and draw from that. Alright, so he shuffled his discard pile, and he'll draw 2 cards to come back up to his hand limit. And that's going to end his turn. Alright, so we're back to this player. He's going to play his politics card. So you remove this card from the game so it just goes out of the deck, and take any one roll card from the stacks into your hand. So this just gets discarded out of the game, and he's going to take roll card of warfare and add that to his hand. So that was his action. Now for his roll, he's actually going to take another warfare card for the roll, and since he's the leader, he's going to attack a planet instead of collecting fighters. So he's going to that goes into his play area. He's going to attack a planet. He's got 2 fighters, so he will discard those and attack this planet and flip it. Okay, so he did the warfare roll, so other players could do the warfare roll as well. So this guy says, yeah, I'm going to do that. And remember, he's not the leader, so he just gets to, if he follows, he gets to collect 1 fighter. Okay, well, I'm back from that phone call. Anyway, this guy was following that roll, so he's going to put that into his discard pile and collect a fighter. So he'll put that in his play area somewhere. And this guy, he's not going to follow the roll, so he's just going to dissent and collect a card. So back to the guy whose actual turn it is. So this is the roll card he played. So that goes into his discard pile, and now he can draw back up to his hand limit. Alright, it's this guy's turn. Just to show something different, we'll say he's going to do, for an action, he's going to produce 1 resource. So he'll put that in his discard pile. He needs to get an orange resource, and he'll produce that on that planet. And then for his roll, maybe he wants to do a trade. So for his roll, he's going to take this card and he's going to trade 1 resource, so he gets to trade that for an influence point, which goes into his area. Now other players have the opportunity to follow and trade as well. He doesn't have any resource to trade, so he's going to dissent and take a card. He doesn't have any resource to trade, so he's going to dissent and take a card. So now this guy's got 2. Now, if you had multiple planets with multiple resources, and you do the roll of trade, of course you could boost and trade with more, but he didn't, so that goes into his discard pile. He's going to discard those 2 research cards, and now he needs to draw back up to his hand limit, but his draw deck is empty, so he has to shuffle. Alright, so he's shuffled his deck. He's only got 2, so he's got to draw 3 more cards. And now we would be back to the first player. So I think that's it. I've done 2 rounds. You can kind of see how the game plays. I think the only roll we didn't do is the research, but I think I showed how that works and how you get these technology cards in my how to play portion. But anyway, that's the game. I think it's pretty fun. Again, playing, it's not really meant to be played solo, which is how I've played it the last several times. But as long as you're playing each player to the best of your ability, it still is pretty fun. But yeah, it's definitely better when you're playing with additional real opponents. But anyway, it's I think it was one of the early deck builders. Of course, Dominion was before this, but I don't think this came out too long after. And it's pretty simple rules, but there's different strategies you can try to, you know, do a lot of produce trades so you get influence points, try to get a lot of planets. Again, and like I said, other planets that you get can have, uh, they have symbols on them. They get to where you can add +1 to your hand size. If you get several of those, then your hand size goes up quite a bit. Um, the technology cards can really help if you get some of those. So, anyway, fun game. Of course, I think Tasty Minstrel Games is out of business, so I don't know how easy it is to get hold of this, especially since it's an older title. But there's probably some used ones out there if this sparked an interest in you. But I'm gonna wrap it up. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.